Solutions Architect. Kim is all over it. I'm going to do that again for the recording. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. We've got Rob Sable speaking today. He's a Senior Solutions Architect from AWS, based here in Cleveland. Um, I know security is not always the sexiest topic, and I got to be honest, it's one of my passions. So always excited when we have a security talk. So um, keep yourself muted for now. If you've got a question, please put it in chat. Right now I've got it so everybody can unmute. So if I call on you, feel free to do that. If we get any Zoom bombers or bad actors, then I'll just lock the room down. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rob.
Thanks, Kathy, and thank you for joining everyone. Um, just a quick additional info on me. I'm Rob. I'm based in the Cleveland area, kind of between Cleveland and Akron. So I am an enterprise solution architect at AWS, been here going on 5 years this month. And so I work with large customers, primarily in the manufacturing industry. And I work with our customers to help them with anything related to their business goals and seeing how AWS can help. Um, One of the areas that I think is growing more interesting. And I would traditionally agree with what Kathy was saying. I still joke with people, security is so inconvenient and you have to pay for it. And no one likes it until you realize you should have been doing something that you weren't. And so security posture and exposure management, as this presentation is now called, is all about understanding where things stand in your cloud environment, and where you can improve, and then help actually acting um, on that improvement plan. There's a lot of um, neat new features that are being enabled through AI functionality. And what I will talk through today is an overview of some AWS security services, and then I'll show a demo of a few of the services I talked through. The reason that I said one thing, or as this presentation is now called, is actually just a few weeks ago at our Reinforce conference, a new set of functionality within Security Hub, and a new breakdown of security products was announced. So there's actually even more and some brand new stuff that I'm going to walk through and demo today, which gives you more capabilities in securing your environment. So what we will talk about primarily from a service perspective is Security Hub and Inspector, which you'll see on this chart. These all fall under the family that we call detection and response. These are all about understanding different threats or vulnerabilities or data sensitivity issues within your environment, feeding them into a common interface or tool, which is what Security Hub is. There are data aggregation and long-term analytical um, features that you get with Security Lake. And then there's also tools that help you dig in, investigate, and then follow up on specific findings, and what was detected by these tools. There's always comments on all-in-one platforms versus um, point solutions, or whatever you want to refer to, a more specialized or niche-based solution. And the way we look at these security services at AWS is that most people have tools in place already. It's kind of infrequent these days, unless you're talking to a startup that hasn't written a line of code yet. But when you're talking with companies that are working in the cloud, there are many tools that are in use, whether they're AWS tools or a ton of partner or other third-party tools. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all environment. The reason the capabilities in AWS security services are broken out to this level is so that you can use the specialized capabilities independently. There are many integration capabilities within Security Hub that I'll show today. And Security Lake is all about analyzing data from a variety of sources. So the AWS model, which is kind of consistent through other product families, is all about giving customers the choice to use the services that they need, to pay for that using a consumption-based model, and ultimately to make sure that overall customers have the ability to secure their environments in the way that is specific to them. The the challenges that we see security teams running into are, there are now many systems with security information, with logging, doing analysis, and trying to understand context of systems and security risks overall. But it's hard to do. There's typically disconnected signals coming from these different systems. It requires people to manually evaluate and really dig into what's happening, and all this can lead to delays in the time it takes to respond to any type of vulnerability or active threat that comes up on a day-to-day basis. So the announcement at um, Reinforce was on the new enhanced Security Hub. This is in preview, which is the last step through before general availability. This means the features available in the console. I'll show it to you today. There's no additional charge for the preview service, but for the other underlying services, there are still the normal charges. But what's the new Security Hub brings is a connection between all of the different aspects here: threats, vulnerabilities, um, your active configurations and networking paths, and it's automatically correlating these signals from different sources together. It's making them actionable, it's helping to prioritize, and ultimately you can automate responses so that if certain conditions occur, you can quickly automate the mitigation, whatever that is for the case. For example, something's detected, a new EC2 instance was put in an account where it's now publicly accessible and it has no security group rules preventing access. So it's been opened up to all ports, all anyone can connect in, and we want to quickly identify that, prioritize it based on its risk factor, make sure it's responded to immediately, and then that type of response can be automated at scale. What happens, Security Hub is an existing service. It has been for at least a few years, but Security Hub was doing both the correlation of data across systems, and also it was looking at controls within the cloud and understanding more deeply and specifically your security posture of your AWS resources. So these two main purposes and large purposes were split. So now you have Security Hub CSPM, or Cloud Security Posture Management. That is the previous Security Hub functionality that everyone would have experienced in the past. It's focused on findings and understanding the state of your cloud resources, where now Security Hub sits over Security Hub, CSPM, and Inspector, and the other security tools and products. So a change in some terminology to separate this overall management from your cloud security posture. Think I mentioned all this, but the benefits of Security Hub are it unifies the signal and data from all these different systems. It helps prioritize and it makes things actionable. So it's not just reporting, here's an issue, but it's saying specifically, here's what we need to do to get this fixed. And that helps to streamline responses ultimately, either by automating with other AWS services, or you can also integrate into your existing ticketing systems like a Jira to kick off your own workflows that you might already have. From a capability standpoint, what you'll see in the demo is you have a unified dashboard showing your exposure, which are findings that demonstrate where you have a specific security risk and what that exposure is, what the path is, which is an interesting part. It's not just talking about a resource, but it's showing you where in your network it is, what the path is. And if it's a network vulnerability, you can see very visually what the path is into a resource. You have a very detailed inventory of your resources and a direct connection into security related aspects. So as far as being able to triage problems, understand where issues are, and alerting appropriately. This is where the new Security Hub Unified Summary paints you that overall picture. From there, you'll see I'll be able to dive into the CSPM data, the inspector data, and any of the other services that you have connected into Security Hub or the third-party integrations that you have may set up. The unified cloud security operations is the technical term or the full term for this concept I've been talking about. I won't go into any more detail here, but the benefits are about simplification and streamlining and making sure it's really clear where to focus from a security perspective. Looking more in depth at the CSPM functionality, which was previously Security Hub. This is about using global standards and controls like PCI or NIST or CIS foundations benchmarks. Those set of standards and controls are compared against the resources in your accounts. And then again, if some misconfiguration or something that does not align with standards occurs, you can automate remediation and also connect out to third-party messaging or alerting or issue tracking systems. But all of this remains the same. It's important to align the security standards that apply to you to each account. And then ideally, I think one part that can be missed with Security Hub is that it's meant to be a workflow engine. It's not just for reporting. It's meant to, at the least, someone can get into the system and you can review the status of your findings, but also with the automation, we can ensure that remediation for our defined issues happens immediately and without requiring manual intervention. The goal is to either prevent or immediately resolve any kind of issues in the environments. This is kind of demonstrating that workflow perspective where we gather data, center it in the CSPM, use some of the additional tools I mentioned earlier to gather additional information like detective, and then ultimately trigger workflows using tools like Systems Manager or step functions or a Lambda function that can go out and perform the remediation. So this is just to show some of the other security services that are commonly interacting with Security Hub. which is acting as this kind of director of the flow. Here's some more. I will share these slides with so Kathy can post them, but I won't spend a lot of time on this, so I can get into the demo. I'll show you about standards and how those can be enabled, and you'll see simple dashboards giving you an ability to drill into results framework by framework. This is not something where you want to go and enable everything, but picking the frameworks that are most applicable to you will help to streamline the focus. And the goal is simple: compare the standards against your resources to point out where things fall outside of standard. I've mentioned a few times the other service that we'll look at, and that is Inspector. Inspector is in general called vulnerability management, which means its goal is to automatically detect software or application level vulnerabilities across your workloads. So when you look at your EC2 instances or your container repository and the code that's in there, we want to be able to shift left, so to speak, or give developers more of an opportunity to give visibility into, are they including code that is introducing some vulnerability into the application code base? Are you writing some code unknowingly that is exposing you to some vulnerability? Inspector is continuously scanning that code and the software that is running, and then also the communication and the network exposure between the endpoints that you have, whether it's EC2 or Lambda, and that unintended network exposure is really saying, is this system that has a vulnerability publicly accessible? How do people get to it? How easy is it to reach? And ultimately, Inspector will give a score that you can use to help prioritize the finding. It is the information is compared with public vulnerability databases, and there's a lot of external information that's pulled in. That vulnerability database is part of what the service is providing. You can also automate the response and take action on the findings, as with other services. But the way that Inspector is usually operationalized is the vulnerability detection flows into Security Hub, which we'll take a look at today, and actions are automated from there. You also can use Inspector without Security Hub and use a basic event based architecture with Event Bridge into step functions, or just store the data in S3 so it could be consumed somewhere else. So again, we want to not just collect and store the data, but also use it to act on to reduce the time that it takes to resolve issues. I'm going to pause here, see if there's any questions. I see is
We've got one in chat from Nicole.
yeah, I was just looking at that, and I would say yes. It does analyze code. So that is part of the functionality, and it's typically integrated into your CI/CD, or whatever your development process is, so that it will identify vulnerabilities in the code, like hard-coded secrets or passwords, or a set of specs specific to your usage of the language, whatever the code is. So that is, um, it would be considered in that family. There's so much overlap with so many of the partner tools, um, there are many options for doing this, but yes, is the short answer.
Nicole, feel free to come off and mute. Did you have any further questions on that, on Inspector?
No, I'm good. Thanks for the answer. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Um, Before I get into the demo, actually, because I really just have one more slide, I'll end up recommending a couple paths if you're interested in. The demo I have is built off of a workshop that we have, which is a step-by-step walk through the services and how to work with them. If you currently work with an AWS account team, they can help support workshops and the steps that I'll show you today. There are also public workshops, which are called activation days. That's the second code there. There's a full schedule of activation days. They tend to be half day to full day events. It involves both a more in-depth version of the slides I went through earlier, and also hands-on walk through the workshops, so you get to actually build and work with the services. There are limited spaces in these events because they usually involve getting access to an AWS test account that you get to work in. But there's a schedule publicly posted at this second link, and the workshop that I'm going through, I think, even has the next session of that in a week from today, I believe, from what I saw. But there's many topics specific to security and different aspects of security. And so if you want to learn more in depth about Security Hub or any of the AWS suite of security services, highly recommend joining one of those activation days if you have the time. And now I'll switch over to my AWS console. Hopefully you're still seeing that.
Yep, we're all set.
Okay, perfect. So the screen that I'm on is the main dashboard of Security Hub CSPM. So when you came to Security Hub in the past, this is just what it looked like. You have the different standards that are in place for this workshop. They are all enabled, just so you can see examples. And so there's more interesting data here, but normally you wouldn't be running multiple versions of the same benchmark. But the benefit of doing the workshop is the account has many things set up for you and it's ready to explore. Whereas in your own accounts, if you're just turning on Security Hub, you'll have no data to start. And that's why starting with a workshop like this is a recommendation, because it gives you the chance to see a system already up and running that is not your own. The format of the workshop is a whole series of online instructions and then a walkthrough step by step. So it's a mix of instructions on how to navigate the user interface and what is actually happening behind the scenes. So this is what the activation day will walk through in detail. This is the schedule that I was mentioning, and this is today's subject, the security posture and exposure activation day. Jason is also a Clevelander and presenter on our calls, so he leads many of the activation days on the topic too. So check out this schedule. There's a lot and highly valuable to dig into more detail. What I'll do is walk through a high level of the user interface, try to leave some time for questions at the end. The standards are giving you alignment to where really think of standards as a collection of controls. Controls are specific rules or statements, like hardware MFA should be enabled for the root user, and what a standard is just a grouping that says, okay, according to the CIS benchmark version 1.4, we know that there are many categories of controls that we want to ensure logging is in place through CloudWatch. We want to make sure we're monitoring our configurations for changes, and then some very common rules that you expect to see probably no matter what standard you're looking at are things like security groups should not allow all inbound or outbound traffic, which is the one that I mentioned previously. Very common during development to leave things wide open and then not remember about it down the road. And this is where having these controls in place to say, nope, that shouldn't be allowed, will at least flag that immediately and give you visibility into these conditions. So you can choose the controls that you have in place by either picking a security standard, which already groups them together, or just by going through the set of all controls. Looks like there's now 546 out of the box potential controls. You can build your own standards and basically choose what you want to measure. And the dashboard gives you a view across resources, also across regions, and also across accounts. This is not a multi-account environment, but you also will be able to see this data by for multiple accounts in an aggregated centralized account. All of these widgets you get out of the box, you can do some customization to the screen by removing and adding new widgets. So you have the ability really to tailor this for folks that are in different roles or concerned with different things. You can customize the summary for your needs. The core underlying data behind all these different charts are what are called findings. So each finding will have many fields attached to it. The product tells us which AWS service this came from. So our first two are from GuardDuty, and we have a couple coming right from Security Hub. There are some comments and that are coming on to this issue because I have some automations in place. This is part of where we get into the workflow concept. You can see that this workflow status is new. And we have a series of automations that you could put in place to more specifically act on issues depending on where they're coming from or what type they are. So if I go down into the automations section, I have a few of these set up as an example. So one thing that you saw there was for production findings, I added a rule, and you go through a simple UI where you pick the fields that you want to target and the values you should check for. And what this says is I'm monitoring a specific account and I'm looking for an environment equaling production. And then I want to tag specifically those findings. And that is the note that you see here saying this has been tagged from my Security Hub automation, and it's telling me this is the production resource. It would be hard potentially to tell just looking at this list if I don't know what the account is and what the specific finding means, but the ability to add automations gives you the ability to tag findings based on the environment. In this case, there's a rule that says if I get a GuardDuty finding, and this says development, but it's meant for production, this rule will say if we receive anything in a production environment count. I want to upgrade the severity to critical and also add a note. Actually, this was the production security at risk note. So the automations can supplement the information that is on the finding to give more context and more direction in terms of the workflow. It could also be used, like in this case, to suppress information. So if you want to say, well, for development systems, I don't care about my info or low priority findings. I just want to automatically suppress those. Then that's what this workflow does. Because everything is in a workflow, it's not that particular findings are removed or deleted, but they're moved into a suppressed status, which it kind of completes the workflow. And as a response to the issues, you can also build custom actions, which uses Event Bridge, that then brings in that event-driven architecture where you're able to act on these results and put in any mitigation that you may need. I can post a link to the workshop before we end here. I see the question. In addition to having our raw findings in Security Hub, the Insights section is a set of essentially these pre-built widgets that are searching and are kind of demonstrating how data is broken down by each of the fields. These are essentially saved searches or saved filters. If you think back to the findings page, we can add all these different filters. And if I create my own custom search for a specific product or account or whatever it is, I can then save that as a new insight. So you can create your own insights, which are your own little deep dive widgets. These that I have are all the out of the box widgets. They're just consuming the data and they're showing very common ways that we know customers will visualize the data. This is showing findings by product, so I can see how many are coming from Inspector versus the other products. And you can so you can search through this list and build up kind of a collection of widgets that are most meaningful to you. Last thing I'll go into here is the integrations out of the box. It's very easy to enable the acceptance of findings from other AWS services like guard duty. So when threats are detected, that will be captured in guard duty and also pushed into a Security Hub finding. In addition to AWS services, you'll see many third-party services, both security tools and also tools that might connect in your workflow, like Jira. So one thing I always suggest that customers do is just take a look at the list of supported integrations, and there are so many tools that are commonly used, like CrowdStrike, CyberArk. There's a lot of out-of-the-box integrations that you can enable that will allow for Security Hub to serve as that central landing zone for security findings. So then you can build out your automations and actions from there. I'll move on to a little more about Inspector and show you the application and code vulnerability. So we also have the concept of findings here, but these are broken down based on where they exist in the environment, whether it's a container, ECR container, EC2 instance, or Lambda function. And you can start drilling into any of these aspects from the dashboard. You also have all the different views in the main menu here. So you can quickly break things down by type of issue or the criticality. Um, the ability to look at a specific instance and then drill in, see all of the specific CVE entries that are connected to this, I think is pretty powerful. Historically, when I've done development, you get some report months later that say, hey, look at all these issues with your code and what are you going to do to fix them? And then it's like, well, what is that? And it can set you back months of time. This gives me all of the background data on specifically the resource, what is the finding, the public data, and the scoring. There's also the concept of an inspector score versus the CVS score, which is just based purely on the CVE scoring. The inspector score takes into account your network and the actual path to that resource. So if I don't have a network path as one of the attack vectors, as an example, then that will reduce the inspector score, essentially saying, well, this has been called out as a risk, but we know because of system configuration that this is not accessible outside of the network. And so the score can be adjusted down, knowing that it's not as critical as something that where there is an attack vector through the public network. So the findings can be broken down by any different area, because it's common that someone says is looking for a status of a particular instance or of a particular function or of a particular application as a whole. And it's very easy now through Inspector to dig in. And here's some examples of code vulnerabilities that have been called out. And it's even pulling me right into, here's the code, why are we recommending the fix, link to all the documentation, and pretty straightforward information that explains why this has been called out and prioritized as such. You can also filter. There's a ton of fields that you can search on. So anything related to the compute or even the vulnerability type can be searched. So let's say I just want to see my network reachability warnings. This now filters down. It's showing me, all right, these are where I need to be concerned. All of the ports are reachable from an internet gateway. And I can drill in and understand where I need to restrict the path. So a lot of ability to customize both the findings, and then in the same way through Security Hub, I could suppress things that were not as important. You can narrow down your findings here, and maybe something of a certain type or lower priority items. You can create a suppression rule in Inspector so that those will be closed out and not start the workflows accordingly in Security Hub. The code scanning does have to be activated to do direct repository scanning, and that can be, you can enable that at the account level or the organization level. So in terms of that code scanning functionality, there's a lot new that is still growing there. That's why it's pretty common to see partner tools that already have findings where we can just consume that data directly into Security Hub and be able to act on it in that way. The vulnerability database can be searched directly for the console. So if you want to drill into specific information on a particular CVE number, you can do that here. There's a nice inventory type of section where, again, based on, oh, let me look into a specific set of applications or EC2 instances, you can drill in and get a report of all findings across the different resources. So this inventory approach, it gives another path into the findings more directly by each service. I think that's all I was going to touch on with Inspector. The last place that this kind of comes together is the new Security Hub. So this is, you'll even see if you're searching in the AWS console, you'll see Security Hub and you'll see Security Hub CSPM. So Security Hub is now the overarching view. The CSPM is what we were just in. So you will see both of those, and I have shortcuts for both of those. The functionality is in some cases similar. You can also do automations and integrations. I think that will continue to grow. And the view from Security Hub is now around the specific areas like exposure. So this is where we have vulnerabilities and findings that can lead to, in this case, credential stealing. The instance profile has vulnerabilities. We get very targeted information based on what type of finding this is. So there is a separation by these topics like threats, exposure, vulnerabilities do map through to, like in this case, threats. You see a lot of the network vulnerabilities. This is where the goal is that you can more easily manage rules and findings across multiple services like Security Hub, CSPM, and Inspector, and Macy, and Guard Duty, and others that we went through today, and that there be a common interface and common approaches to really honing in on what issues are most important, and then also the ability to resolve automatically any of these issues. The goal is that vulnerabilities that we've seen before that we know can happen are have automated resolution in place. Posture management is the Security Hub CSPM data. And so the thing that is kind of the nature of where things stand with the preview versus the existing functionality is that the existing Security Hub still does everything that it did around findings and enabling workflows based on those findings. More of that set of approaches and connection across different services and integrations will continue to be built out in Security Hub. So the new Security Hub service is meant to be the front end starting point that points you to your specific threats, vulnerabilities, and exposure. And then the data from all of the other security services is being used to automatically connect the dots behind the scenes and inform the the suggested next steps and resolution paths here. So I will pause there, open it up for any questions about Security Hub, or I'll share also the workshop link and the activation day link in the chat. But if you have any questions, feel free to jump in or ask Kathy for permission.
No need to ask for permission. Thank you so much, Rob. We've got a small group here, so feel free to come off a mute, or if you're more comfortable, you can raise your hand using the menu at the bottom of your screen, and I could call on you. But feel free just to come off mute and shout them out there.
Hey Rob,
Either every Oh, there we go. I was gonna say maybe he did a bit of a job, right?
how you doing, Rob? I just had a question. I'm kind of new to IT and new to the more of the security stuff. Just got my CompTIA A plus and my Security A plus, and realistically, I'm trying to figure out like what kind of. I know you mentioned the workshop. What kind of things can I do to really learn this type of stuff? I've heard of certain projects. If you know of any kind that I could do to really get into this.
Sure. If you're talking about just security learning more from an AWS perspective, there's a ton of training on a system called AWS Skill Builder. I will share a link to that, but AWS training and certification has a ton of, like, hundreds of free digital courses, and then they're grouped into different categories by role or by functional area, like security. So what you can do is follow, there's like learning paths for the different roles, as an example. So you can say, oh, I want to follow the security learning path, and it lists out all of the digital trainings, all of the workshops, all of the certifications that are relevant. And so that's an effective way, is to follow these different role-based learning paths, which kind of essentially gives you a curriculum that you can follow.
Okay.
Rob, what would be a good certification path for Colin for AWS certs?
Um, there is a security specialty certification, but I think there's also, you have to have some of the basics, or a lot of the basics, maybe potentially. So it depends what you're trying to do. If you were wanting to learn about AWS and security, I would say start with solution architects, associate, really all the associates, but solution architect and sysops engineer would probably be the most applicable ones. Security specialty just focuses on the tools, where if your role was like, you manage security, or are involved in security across multiple clouds and on-premise systems, and you're specifically in the security department, then there are learning paths that are more geared towards that, where it's not about learning AWS in detail, is really just about the security specific. So I think that would be the difference, is if you just want to understand security in the context of AWS, or if you're focused on security across AWS and other areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I'll definitely take those into consideration and look into those. Thank you so much.
I had a quick question. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I might have missed this. I thought I heard RBAC, but let's say you have these container images and you need to scan them for vulnerabilities. From what I recall, I used to do it in Cloud9, AWS service, but is there now another service that you can do? I mean, because these container images are going to be, deployed on EKS, that sort of thing. And before they get on there, how do best way to scan for the vulnerabilities?
So from a development environment standpoint, since Cloud9 is not around anymore, there's a few approaches. One is there are developer toolkits for all the major IDEs, VS Code and IntelliJ and whatever else. So
Right,
I
but
use
I meant on the platform itself. In other words, before you deploy it with with the Kubernetes cluster, like the AWS platform.
Mhm. Yeah, so you can integrate the checks like the inspector checks through your CI/CD process so that when code gets checked in, then it could get scanned then, or you could also do it like on your own local development environment before you check it in by using those the AWS toolkit for the IDE. There's also through SageMaker Studio, you can
Right.
run Visual or a VS Code the code editor, and that would be another way you could do it.
Well, I mean, you do get the terminal through SageMaker and even like just the Jupyter Notebook IDE. But I mean, is there a way to do it within the Jupyter Notebook itself? Like, nowadays?
I don't, the Jupyter Notebook, I'm not sure on. I would have to look into that. I know
But you
there's a
mentioned
new,
SageMaker, that's why. Yeah.
yeah, well, there's a new SageMaker code editor, and when you launch it, it actually looks like you're running Visual Studio or VS Code. But it's very similar to what Cloud9 was,
Oh, okay,
but
got it, got it.
it's running VS Code off of a cloud instance. So SageMaker, there's a lot of new. They also did a name change where SageMaker AI is the new platform. SageMaker is still the machine learning platform,
Sure.
but the newer like end user facing tools like SageMaker Canvas and um, the end user friendly versus the tools geared towards data scientists. That's where you'll see that code editor brought in as well.
And so as far as you're aware, like, I mean, AWS is probably deploying Gen AI agents to actually do that within, let's say, one of their tools, whatever it may be, code editor or SageMaker. I mean, when I say Gen AI agents, it could be for like Claude or whatever whoever they team, whoever you choose, actually.
Yeah, well, that is a whole additional topic around there's Amazon Q Developer, which
Okay,
is also a tool that will run in your IDE, and that would be similar to like GitHub Copilot, or it's a Gen AI coding assistant. So
right.
that also does security scanning, architectural review, and writes code with you. Um, Hero, yeah, I was on vacation and didn't get access before it filled up. So um I've I'm still interested in checking that out, but I think that is the Hero is more like the other vibe coding platforms that people talk about, which names are escaping me, like Replit or whatever. But Q is more, it's what originally was called Code Whisperer, and it's
Right.
more just something that is partnering with you, and you can ask it questions, and it has specific functions that can do. Versus Kiro is like a whole new AI driven development experience. But I use VS Code, have the and have Q enabled, and there's also a Q command line interface where you
Right.
can type in and say, oh, I want to build a Python Lambda function that gets some files from S3 and does this and that, and it will write up the code for you and write tests for you and write documentation for you. So um, that I think those are the different layers that we look at, is at the developer level in your IDE, also at the CI/CD level in your build process, and then also checking deployed resources and active threat detection. Because yeah, it's not just looking at it at one layer, it's looking across all these different aspects and having a multifaceted approach.
And you said AWS Q developer, which is like a code assistant, but does all these other functions. That's something new, right? That they that replace Code Whisperer, more or less.
It is CoWhisper. It's just the new name.
Okay, got it. More
So
functionality, more features. Okay,
yeah, it's the newer generation, and they're constantly building in additional features. So it does very specific additional things called transformations. So it does specific Java and .NET upgrades. It helps with VMware transformation. So there's a lot of additional specific functionality that continues to be built into Q, which is pretty neat. That could be a whole other topic, and then some.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Thanks for the information.
For the question, Al. Well, we're coming up at the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up here. Rob, of course, is on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with him or with myself. Thank you all for joining, and I just want a special shout out. This makes me so happy, but I just realized that almost half of our attendees today are women, so shout out to you all. Yes. Thank you, Rob. Great information as always. Anyone that's remotely close to DC, keep an eye out on dccommunityday.com. It's a one-day user conference put on by the community for the community, so a lot of value and security related information there as well. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
I'll also send a link for that, the community day, whenever you get a chance.
You know what? I'll send it real quick before I cut this off.
Thank you. Good session.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes,
Thanks,
I
everyone.
agree. Thank you very much.
Have a great day, everyone.